Hello and welcome to part 4 of March to the Sea, the Vandals Let's Play series for Total War Attila. On the last episode, Roman resistance to our advance was virtually non-existent, and Wisimar and the Children of the Forest blazed a swath of destruction across the provinces of central Gaul, leaving nothing but burned-out dwellings, ravaged countryside, and ashes in their wake. Godigisel followed by sacking and razing settlements in southern Gaul. Our coffers overflowed with the wealth of our enemies as we crossed the Pyrenees and pillaged our way to the southern coast of Iberia. We continued to build and solidify alliances with the Ostrogoths and Visigoths, each agreeing to defensive pacts with the Vandals. Perhaps most surprising of all, we were able to bring an 800-pound gorilla into our fight with the Western Roman Empire, in that we were not only able to convince the Eastern Roman Empire to abandon their lucrative trade agreement, but also to actually declare war on their former allies, although we paid handsomely in this diplomatic maneuver. Our migrating hordes neared the end of their journey as the southern coast of Iberia came into view on the horizon, and Wisimar and Godigisel simultaneously attacked the walled settlements of Carthago Nova and Tarraco, respectively. The Children of the Forest won a hard-fought assault on the western gate of Carthago Nova, whose defenses were bolstered by the veteran Roman admiral Marcus Plancus, while the Oath were barely opposed in their appropriation of Tarraco by the governor and acting Western Roman Emperor Vesuvius Clarus, who was killed when the city was taken. Although our long march to the sea as a migrating horde is now ended, our larger journey is just beginning. We have certainly damaged our relationship with the Western Roman Empire beyond repair for the foreseeable future, and they will likely continue to pursue us given the means and opportunity. And let us not forget the rumors of the birth of a Hunnic heir in the east, prophesied to bring the great kingdoms of the west to their knees in subjugation, and possibly a harbinger of the end times. Our people must begin anew, hold true to their beliefs, and leave behind their wicked deeds of the past. We return to the new Vandal kingdom in Iberia, just as the year 400 is coming to a close. I've already done most of what I can for the turn, although I take a moment to implement the resettlement edict in both of my new provinces, which will accelerate the growth slightly, although it's nothing in comparison to the resettlement bonus we get from ending our Great Migration. More importantly, it will provide a small but significant 10% reduction in building costs when it kicks in next turn. With that done, I end the turn. Aside from limited visualization of some Roman movement in Italy, not much happens in the Intern Phase with the exception that Hispania respectfully requests a defensive alliance, and I once again respectfully decline. We've just entered the 5th century AD. Our new society hasn't been able to match our food consumption and production yet, and we're suffering from a famine, which is not helping our public order. I've decided to start using Godigisel's accumulated influence to adopt some of the other nobles into the family, so we can improve our pool of candidates for generalships, governorships, and admiralties from the next generation. His attempt in this instance was successful, as Gesalec fell to his knees in gratitude, quite out of character for his phlegmatic demeanor. Galsvintha wrangled a little more political control for Godigisel, which is good since I'm expending fairly large quantities of influence at once. The mercenary commander Appa, who approached us last turn, has considered our request and acquiesced to a cheaper recruitment cost just for 3 turns. I probably won't use the mercenaries anyway, but it's nice to have the option. I start converting the buildings in our new settlements. The base infrastructure of both cities will need to be converted, which is an extremely costly and lengthy undertaking, but it will eliminate the food consumption penalty, and it's necessary for future upgrades that will make a big difference in our garrison and defenses. Both of the port buildings do not need to be converted right now. I've got a trade port at Carthago Nova and a fishing jetty at Tarraco, which are fine for right now. The adobe dryer is giving a fair amount of wealth but is impacting squalor and public order, and cannot be converted, so I start tearing it down to make space for one of our buildings. Likewise, the supply storage at Tarraco must be torn down and replaced. The Forum and Tabernae cultural buildings can be converted to the barbarian versions, and the Latin chapel is converted to the Aryan Christian version. I probably won't build many of these due to the steep upkeep cost, but I need at least one so I can recruit priests. Finally, I add a granary in the last building slot at Carthago Nova that should address our food consumption issue. The children of the forest are suffering attrition due to the food shortage, but I require their presence at Carthago Nova to counter the public order penalties. I decided to raise another army. Although Genseric or Indulf could command it, I decided to leave them as retainers for the time being and recruit another noble from outside the family who I can then adopt. Athalric has the fearless warrior trait and is still fairly young, so I set him up as the general of a new army, the Solitude. Because of my lack of barbarian infrastructure, I can only recruit spearmen, so I recruit 2 of them so he can garrison the defense of Carthago Nova, and I move Wisimar and the Children of the Forest along the road to Cordoba. Godigisel and the Oath stay put in Terrico. I set to work on researching Sacred King along the Civil Technologies tree so we can build the Warlords and Chieftains' holds. With the destruction of the supply storage building complete, I start also constructing a granary at Terrico. I've come to believe that these are essential at province capitals as they address both food and sanitation in a single building without any upkeep cost. I go looking for a bride for Gesalec, our province governor at Carthago Nova. The Saxons are offering Godigisel, a faithful woman who will provide an authority bonus for Gesalec, which is very helpful for a province governor. Not only that, but Guis agrees to provide a hefty dowry as well. Wisimar attacks and occupies Cordoba, making short work of the small garrison. He repairs the damaged buildings and starts building a granary in the available empty construction site. Godigisel uses a bit more of his influence in an attempt to adopt Athalric into the family. I'll have to hire a governor from the available candidates for the province of Baetica. Reviewing the choices, Godigisel seems the most suitable given his overseer ability. In the Intern Phase, the Alans ask for my help in their war against the Eastern Roman Empire. Although Godigisel would prefer to make war on Romans, right now they are a powerful enemy of my enemy, the Western Roman Empire, so I must decline. As we enter the fall of 401 AD, we are still suffering a minimal amount of attrition, but we seem to have solved the famine and financial issues for now, being slightly positive in both food and wealth. Athalric now becomes a part of the family, so we have a pretty good sized group to ensure that Godigisel and his heir continue to maintain control of the tribe. The Ostrogoths have converted to Latin Christianity, which is not good news for us, aligning them more with Rome than with us, with respect to religious views. I have enough of the spoils left over from the trip through Gaul to convert the settlement building at Cordoba, but the coffers will be running low after this, so I'll have to address our finances. I would like to disband some troops, but not only do I need the garrisons right now to maintain order, I want to continue moving across Iberia. At Carthago Nova, I start building an artisan since I have no means to replace or recruit onagers or archers right now. I spend a little time outfitting my commanders. In particular, I outfit Wisimar in a suit of chainmail and equip him with the Legionary Patera, which provides a small 5% reduction in recruitment cost, but a more significant 10% reduction in upkeep cost. Godigisel is also already holding a Legionary Patera in his accessory slot. I want to get some experience for my new commander Athalric, so Wisimar moves back from Cordoba, and the Children of the Forest transfer some of their units over to the Solitude. The Eastern Roman Empire is keen to establish trade with us. So keen, in fact, that they're willing to grant military access and offer a substantial subsidy. I keep increasing the payment request until I overestimate their generosity slightly, although in the end they are still willing to part with over 7,000. Godigisel convinces the Saxons to enter our growing military alliance. I also managed to get a non-aggression pact from the Abdanians, although I think they remain far away from us for the moment. The Marcomanns and Lugians, both Eastern Germanic tribes, agree to non-aggression pacts with us, with the Lugians offering a small amount of money in the agreement. In the Intern Phase, the Bastarnians also contact us with a generous offer of 1,000 in exchange for a defensive alliance, which I find to be totally reasonable. There's a small Roman fleet which moves into port at Palma, but the more pressing issue is that a large, previously unseen Roman army moves into view at Toledo, just north of Cordoba. Gunderic has now sired his own illegitimate son, and we seem to be back in a state of famine, again consuming more food than we're producing. I convert the forum to a town center at Cordoba and add another artisan in the empty construction site. I can probably use one of the artisans as a smithy, and the other as a woodcarver once they're upgraded. I upgrade the town center at Carthago to a meeting hall to improve the public order, and I start upgrading the Aryan chapel to an Aryan hermitage. I had to think a little while to decide if I would prefer this or an Aryan church. The hermitage provides food production while the church gives public order. I think the public order will sort itself out eventually, and I already have the meeting hall, whereas I would like to convert my fishing jetty to a trade jetty to help cover the cost of the religious building, once my food situation is more stable. I probably won't build many more of these since the monetary penalty is so great, but at least we'll have access to priests soon. Hethan moves into Toledo to act against the Roman legion, having great success in misdirecting them and limiting their movement. I can now see that Legio 30, commanded by Flavius Eutychianus, is a fairly balanced force, a little heavy on the Comatensis spears, but with several mercenary units including some Celtic axe bands, several skirmishers, a unit of cavalry, and a couple of onagers. This does seem to be a fairly potent army, although I think an army with some good melee infantry and cavalry would be able to take them on. Godigisel, having heard of the new threat, takes it upon himself to confront them. He moves west of Carthago and marches on Segobriga, defeating its small garrison and occupying the settlement. Segobriga has a very useful olive oil resource that will provide both food and wealth once repaired. Wisimar and Attila improve their armies, adding a few Germanic spearmen units since that's all we can recruit right now. Godigisel upgrades his Germanic bowmen to Germanic hunters. Although the hunters have similar base damage per arrow, they shoot about 25% faster and can temporarily boost their damage output with the precision shot skill. The upkeep cost increase is almost negligible. Before I end the turn, a few characters have skill upgrades. Godigisel reached level 6 and adds the hunter and judge skills. I have my sights set on the legend skill the next time I increase in rank. I swap Gunderic's epic poet retainer out for an artist to assist with public order at Carthago, and both he and Gesalec receive the wolf and raven skills. In the Intern Phase, we can see the Caledonian High King has sailed all the way to just off the southern coast of Gaul. The small Roman fleet at Palma sails to the port of Corrales. Gesalec and Wisimar have their hands full now at Carthago Nova as tensions over province instability, religious differences, Vandal immigration, and intermittent famine have boiled over, and the malcontents have banded together and risen up in armed revolt. There's a small group of rebels led by a former Roman soldier, Secundus Publicola, who have gathered at the outskirts of Carthago Nova. The rebel army is quite small and does not pose a threat right now.
I must confront these rebels at once. I will take my garrison force through the eastern gate and corner the enemy between the mountain and the coast. I will kill or capture those I can and hang their bodies from the ramparts.
Wisimar, you will not. You will command your officers to remain at their posts in the city. I want this flame to attract more of the moths who normally stay hidden and surreptitiously gnaw at the fabric of our sovereignty.
They must be put down. Inaction on our part will be seen as weakness or at best as apathy. It will encourage dissent.
A show of strength at the right moment is wise, but now is not the time.
If you allow this rebellion to grow, I cannot so easily contain it. Many more lives will be lost.
I do not care about the lives of your men, Wisimar. I only care about operating this province efficiently and sustainably. I am governor of Carthaginensis. Your military actions will not run counter to my decrees while you operate in my jurisdiction. I serve here on the authority of Godigisel, king of the Vandals. You have served our king well, Wisimar, but you will never be a member of the royal family. Remember your place as a soldier, and disobey me at your peril. The characteristically bloodthirsty Wisimar readies the troops to crush the rebellion, but calmer heads prevail as the calculating Gesalec advises him to wait. He explains that as more fringe elements of the society drift out to join the rebellion, they can all be crushed at once, which will be a boon to long-term stability. Although Wisimar at first angrily refuses, citing his past military triumphs and the lives of his soldiers who would be lost in a larger, bloodier assault, Gesalec calmly explains that he is the governor of Carthago Nova as charged by Godigisel, and that Wisimar's military actions will comply with his orders while in the province of Carthaginensis. Wisimar backs down from the confrontation. The next turn, a dispute comes to the attention of Godigisel. It seems that a man named Videric, a soldier serving in the Oath, is accused of stealing Indolf's sword. Godigisel recognizes the theft of a man's sword as a serious offense, but rather than act on Indolf's suspicions alone, decides to arbitrate and investigate the matter before rendering a judgment. Godigisel then appoints new officers, with Godigisel, Gesalec, Genseric, and Gunderic each appointed as a companion. Wisimar is given the office of warlord, although it's merely a title as he has in effect been the Vandal warlord since the initiation of the migration.
What's your wisdom?
We agree to a non-aggression pact with the Angles and Caledonians, and our defensive allies, the Ostrogoths and Visigoths, agree to join our broader military alliance. The rebels at Carthago Nova have increased in strength and now have a couple of cavalry units and onagers in addition to their infantry troops. Gesalec judges that the time is right to attack them, and both he and Wisimar confront the rebels on the road east of Carthago Nova. The rebels do not flee, although they are outnumbered 2-1, and battle commences. Wisimar's main force is situated just north of the road on a low hill, while the rebel army is on the road to the east. Our sole unit of cavalry are badly outclassed against the Roman cavalry units in the rebel force, so Wisimar orders them to hide at the foot of the hill and advance along the scrubland to the north, keeping their distance until the main force has closed on the enemy. Gesalec's small group of reinforcements will be approaching Wisimar's position from Carthago Nova to the west. The enemy seem content to defend their position, so Wisimar waits until Gesalec joins him atop the hill overlooking the road. Wisimar divides the force in two, with each half containing roughly equal units of spears and axe infantry. Wisimar leads one group south to the road to confront the enemy head-on, while he puts Gesalec in command of the other force, who begin moving to the northern flank of the enemy. Gesalec's spearmen move into a loose formation as large stones hurled by the rebel onagers crash into their ranks. Meanwhile, the Germanic warband cavalry have maneuvered to the rear of the enemy, although they are keeping their distance as several imposing units of enemy cavalry are present. Gesalec moves his troops toward the rear of the enemy as Wisimar closes in on their southwestern flank. Our front lines are now within throwing distance of the enemy. The rebel spears feint and move towards Gesalec's troops and then withdraw. Suddenly, a unit of the enemy cavalry break away from their clustered formation and charge into Wisimar's front line. They are closely followed by another unit of cavalry, although after the first unit crashes into the firmly planted spears of Wisimar's Germanic spearmen, they break off the charge and pull back. The bulk of the enemy then commit to Gesalec's force, with the melee infantry engaging his front-line spearmen, closely followed by a unit of cavalry. Wisimar has quickly broken the single unit of attacking cavalry, but realizes he must move quickly before the enemy break through or circle around Gesalec's front line to strike his more vulnerable axe units and personal retinue of swordsmen. Gesalec scrambles to stay behind the relative safety of the front line of spearmen, but the center of the force is already starting to waver, having suffered a devastating charge from the shock cavalry. As the enemy general moves in to support his cataphracts, the center unit of Germanic spearmen breaks and begins to flee. Seeing panic start to ripple through the line, Gesalec bellows for the men to hold their ground and prepares to receive a nightmarish cavalry charge. The Germanic axe warband units are moving around the flanks to support their comrades, although the situation is looking precarious, as the remaining enemy cavalry near Wisimar rally and charge into the rear of a unit of spearmen as they rush to the aid of Gesalec's men. Complete chaos erupts as the Germanic warband units join the fight, and Gesalec commits himself. The enemy cataphract charge, although effective, was not without cost, as they suffered severe losses from the spears, and they begin wavering and then break as their numbers and fighting spirit dwindle. Likewise, the rebel scout equites can no longer hold up to our heavy spear units, and they too begin to flee as Wisimar's first unit of spears charges into the rear of the enemy. The enemy infantry are also beginning to waver as the casualties from our Germanic axes pile up. The tide seems to be turning, and Wisimar finally finishes off the cavalry that initiated the combat, moving toward the enemy rear to administer the death blow to the rebel force. As our two forces converge, the enemy general is pulled from his horse by a spearman and murdered before his troops' eyes. With their commander fallen, the enemy morale fails utterly, and multiple units begin to dissolve into wild-eyed men fleeing for their lives. The Germanic mounted warband chase down the fleeing cataphracts as the majority of the enemy infantry are caught between our forces. The few spearmen who escape are run down by our cavalry. The enemy are totally annihilated at the cost of about 200 men. Wisimar's unit of spearmen who suffered the cataphract charge are severely depleted but intact. It seems that despite their differences, Wisimar and Gesalec are a potent combination when they unite against their enemies. With the olive orchard repaired, Godigisel orders the construction of a well at the empty construction site in Segobriga to help with the province sanitation and growth. Godigisel increases in rank, improving his skills. After that, I end the turn. During the intern phase, the Visigoths asked me to declare war on the Eastern Roman Empire, but I decline. I still have enough trouble with the Western Roman Empire. The small fleet at Palma sails away to the east, possibly to Carthage. The Roman army in Iberia chases down and eliminates our allies, the Swabian horde. We're informed that their faction has been completely destroyed. Gunderic has another illegitimate child, although perhaps he's fond of this one, since he's named her after his stepsister in Gunthus. Godigisel has to call in some political favors to obtain his office as a companion, but the other officers are appointed without any issue arising. Godigisel's handling of the stolen sword incident is seen as tactful, so his reputation as a wise ruler is strengthened, and he gains the smooth talker trait. His skill in negotiation will probably benefit our whole kingdom. With the enemy army out of the province, Godigisel moves on and captures Toledo. Although depleted, they have a fairly sizable garrison of infantry and ranged units, so now's an opportune time to seize the city, even if I've not yet completely consolidated my gains in southeast Iberia. If anything, I think the balance bar is overly generous in this siege, so I opt for an auto-resolve, losing only 100 men in the process, a number that should be all but replenished by next turn.
Ready for orders.
Hethan attempts to once again misdirect Legio 30. Although they have grown wise to his tricks, he's apparently learned some things from watching the Roman legion, and he improves his builder and surveillance skills. Apparently he was employing a skilled courtesan for his endeavors to hinder the Roman commander, and she returns to him now for use in future schemes. During the intern phase, the Ostrogoths have placed Segusio under siege in Liguria, and more destruction rages to the north in war-torn Transalpine Gaul. Legio 30 retreats further to the west in Iberia, beyond the range of our scouts. At the end of 402 AD, a daughter named Vili is born to Genseric by his Alani wife Mata. We've completed the Sacred King technology research now, and although there are numerous options and I spent a while considering what direction to pursue, I ultimately settled on community markets as it will let me upgrade both our ports and markets to Tier 3 level, and providing a small faction-wide wealth bonus for commercial income on top of that. We will need to return to military technologies in the near future to keep pace with the advances of our enemies, but we are approaching the end of the second tier of technologies when fairly large monetary investments are required to advance our technology. Friedebald moves into Caesar Augusta, which appears to already be under siege by Hispania. We're bound to clash with this faction soon. Meanwhile, Hethan moves further west but doesn't encounter the missing Legio 30. Godigisel orders the garrison encampment at Toledo repaired due to its public order bonus, and he has the rally field torn down to make room for more Vandal improvements. Having completed the Aryan hermitage in Terrico, we recruit our first Aryan Priest. Well, in this case it turns out to be a priestess, it seems. A 30-year-old woman named Scarillo, a talented public speaker, will be the first to lead our flock and begin converting the numerous Nicene Christians remaining in the province. With nothing much else to do, I end the turn waiting for provinces to stabilize, buildings to be built, and to see where Flavius Eutychianus and Legio 30 will show up again. He doesn't disappoint, as Hethan spots his army moving south on the road from Bracara to Hispalis. There are an enormous number of Western Roman separatist forces gathering around the Roman capital of Mediolanum. The Bastarnians asked to join our enormous military coalition, and I agree. As we enter 403 AD, Indolf and Ingunthus welcome a noble son to the family. Chintila, a fugitive from a rival power, arrives to King Godigisel's royal hall and requests asylum from the Vandals. Although Godigisel normally cannot abide a traitor or a deserter, this man seems to be from the Western Roman Empire, and so he considers anyone acting against them to be a friend, so he welcomes the man. Perhaps he can give us some insight into the Roman plans for Iberia, or the movements of Flavius Eutychianus and his legion. With the arrival of his legitimate son, Indolf has become demanding and belligerent in his request to return to his family from his service with Godigisel and the Oath, his loyalty dipping precipitously. So Godigisel releases him and he is placed on leave from his retainer position. The Quadians join the barbarian coalition, while Godigisel secures a wife for Radagisus from the temperamental Visigoths, as well as a healthy sum of 1,200. I begin upgrading the artisan at Cordoba to a woodcarver so we can start building more archer and siege units. At the end of the turn, we see that the Marians have taken Caesarea, and their High King has embarked and sailed to and from Palma, presumably plundering the island colony. The Western Roman Empire is now becoming hemmed in on all sides. Hopefully we can force Flavius Eutychianus into a confrontation and complete our occupation of Iberia so we can begin to push into northern Africa and start our naval campaign in the Mediterranean Sea. We'll leave the story here, but please join me next time for more tales of Vandal adventure, peril, and conquest on March to the Sea.